personal life. Taylor Lautner's personal life has been relatively low-key compared to those of his Twilight co-stars. He has been in several relationships over the years. In 2022, he married Taylor Dome, a nurse whom he had begun dating in 2018. The couple's shared first name became a charming detail that their supporters found endearing. He has spoken warmly in interviews about the happiness and stability that his marriage has brought him, describing it as the most important and grounding relationship of his adult life. Taylor has also been open in recent years about the psychological challenges of fame at a young age, the pressure, the scrutiny, the difficulty of developing a sense of self when the entire world is telling you who you are and what you represent. He has spoken about therapy and self-reflection as important parts of his personal journey, and his candor on these subjects has connected with many of his fans who are navigating their own experiences of identity and self-understanding. These three actors, Kristen Stewart, Robert Pattinson, and Taylor Lautner, came from very different backgrounds, trained in very different ways, and have pursued very different paths since the conclusion of the Twilight Saga. But for a specific and extraordinary period of time, they were the faces of one of the most culturally significant film franchises of the modern era. Their performances in Breaking Dawn Part 1, and across the entire saga, reflect not just their individual talents but the specific chemistry and dynamic that existed between them, a dynamic that no amount of planning or casting strategy can manufacture, but that occasionally arises naturally and genuinely between performers who are exactly right for the material they have been given. Their stories are ongoing, their careers continuing to develop in ways that would have been difficult to predict during the peak Twilight years. And that, perhaps more than anything else, is the most interesting thing about all three of them. Jacob Black and the Twilight transformation. When Twilight was being cast, Taylor Lautner auditioned for the role of Jacob Black and was chosen. Jacob Black in the first Twilight film is a relatively minor character, a friendly, warm-hearted young Quileute man who has a crush on Bella and who serves primarily as a piece of backstory exposition about the mythology of the Cullen family. Taylor played the role with likable ease, but the first film did not require him to do anything particularly demanding. What happened between Twilight and New Moon is one of the most talked about physical transformations in modern Hollywood history. In the New Moon novel and film, Jacob Black becomes a werewolf and emerges from that transformation as a much more physically imposing presence, taller, broader, enormously muscular. The character's physical change is narratively significant, and for the film to work, the actor playing him needed to undergo a corresponding transformation. Taylor, who was 17 at the time of New Moon's production, committed to one of the most intensive physical training regimens ever undertaken by a teenage actor in Hollywood. He worked with professional trainers daily, consumed a carefully structured high-calorie, high-protein diet, and built his body into something that was genuinely remarkable. He gained approximately 30 pounds of muscle during the preparation period, going from the slender, boyish figure of the first film to the powerfully built, physically commanding presence that Jacob Black required in the later films. The transformation was so complete and so impressive that it became a significant talking point in the marketing of New Moon and subsequent films. This physical transformation, combined with his genuine martial arts background and natural athleticism, made Taylor Lautner ideally suited to the action elements of the later Twilight films. He performed many of his own stunts and brought an athletic credibility to the wolf pack sequences that would have been difficult to achieve with a less physically gifted actor. His performance, as Jacob, grew in emotional complexity with each subsequent film. New Moon requires Jacob to be Bella's emotional anchor during the period of Edward's absence. He is her source of warmth and normalcy, and Taylor brought a genuine sweetness and depth of feeling to that dynamic. Eclipse required him to play the more confrontational aspects of Jacob's personality, including his direct competition with Edward for Bella's love. And Breaking Dawn Part 1 gave him some of the most dramatically complex material he had ever been given. Jacob's anguish at Bella's marriage, his decision to break from his pack, his desperate attempt to protect Bella, and the extraordinary moment of imprinting on Renesmee. Career after Twilight. Taylor Lautner's post-Twilight career has followed a different trajectory than those of his co-stars. He was, during the peak Twilight years, one of the most commercially in-demand young actors in Hollywood. He starred in Abduction in 2011, an action thriller in which he played a young man who discovers that his parents are not who he thinks they are. The film received poor reviews but demonstrated his viability as an action lead based on his physical presence and stunt capabilities. He appeared in Grown Ups 2 in 2013 and in the fantasy comedy film Run the Tide in 2016. He spent several years away from the highest-profile Hollywood productions, a period that he has spoken about in interviews as one of genuine personal growth and recalibration. He appeared in the television series Cuckoo on the BBC, playing a recurring role that allowed him to demonstrate comic timing and a lighter side of his screen persona. In 2022, he appeared in the Scream franchise's fifth installment, Scream, marking a return to mainstream horror and earning positive reception from genre fans. He has continued to work in film and television, while also becoming a significant presence on social media, particularly on platforms where his candidness about his personal life and his warm, self-deprecating humor have earned him a considerable following. Taylor Lautner, the youngest star of the saga. Early life and background. Taylor Daniel Lautner was born on February 11, 1992, in Grand Rapids, Michigan, in the United States. Unlike Kristen Stewart, who grew up in Los Angeles surrounded by the entertainment industry, and unlike Robert Pattinson, who grew up in London and came to acting through theater, Taylor Lautner grew up in the American Midwest, in a family that had no direct connection to Hollywood whatsoever. His father, Daniel Lautner, worked for a software company, and his mother, Deborah Lautner, was a homemaker. His family background was solidly ordinary, middle American, and far removed from the world of film and celebrity. Taylor has a younger sister named McKenna. The family was close-knit and supportive, and the atmosphere he grew up in was one of encouragement and positive reinforcement, a background that gave him the self-confidence to pursue his interests with dedication. What defined Taylor Lautner's childhood more than anything else was not acting but martial arts. He discovered karate at the age of 6 and immediately demonstrated an exceptional natural ability for it. He began training seriously and quickly rose through the competitive martial arts circuit, becoming a nationally recognized competitor. By the time he was in his early teens, he had won multiple junior world martial arts championships and had established himself as one of the most talented young martial artists in the country. He trained in the style of Sofian Inalt, a form of competitive martial arts that emphasizes combination techniques, and his skill level was genuinely exceptional. This physical background, the discipline, the coordination, the comfort in his own body, the ability to perform under pressure, would prove enormously important to his acting career, particularly in the physically demanding role of Jacob Black. Early acting career. From commercials to Shark. Taylor Lautner's entry into acting came through the same talent agency circuit that identifies many young performers with physical charisma and natural presence. He began appearing in commercials and small television roles, developing on-camera comfort and learning the basic mechanics of performance. His work during this period was not particularly distinguished, but he was gaining experience and visibility. His first major film opportunity came in 2005 when he was cast in The Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl, directed by Robert Rodriguez. This was a family fantasy adventure film in which Taylor played the lead role of Shark Boy, a young boy with shark-like qualities who inhabits a fantasy world. The film was aimed at young audiences and required Taylor to bring a physical energy and a boyish charisma that came naturally to him. It was not a critically acclaimed film by any standard, but it was a commercial success, and it put Taylor Lautner's face and name in front of a large audience for the first time. He continued working in smaller film and television roles over the following years, including appearances in The Bernie Mac Show and My Wife and Kids on television. He was building his resume and his range, but his career had not yet found its definitive direction. Life after Twilight. The reinvention. What Robert Pattinson did with his career after the conclusion of the Twilight Saga is one of the most deliberate and successful acts of creative reinvention in recent Hollywood history. He was intensely aware of the danger of being permanently defined by Edward Cullen, and he made a series of extremely strategic choices in the years following Breaking Dawn Part 2 that progressively dismantled that definition and replaced it with something entirely different. He starred in Cosmopolis in 2012, directed by David Cronenberg, one of the most celebrated and unconventional filmmakers in the world. Cosmopolis is a deliberately difficult, alienating, intellectually demanding film, about as far from mainstream romantic fantasy as it is possible to get. Robert played the lead role with a chilling, robotic detachment that demonstrated he was willing to do almost anything to challenge the audience's expectations of him. He appeared in The Rover in 2014, a stark Australian post-apocalyptic film. He was in Maps to the Stars in 2014, another Cronenberg film. He starred in The Lost City of Z in 2016, James Gray's acclaimed adventure drama about explorer Percy Fawcett. He appeared in Good Time in 2017, a frenetic crime film from directors Josh and Benny Safdie, and his performance, as a desperate criminal trying to rescue his brother from prison, was one of the most talked about performances of that year, earning him his most significant critical reassessment to that point. He was in The Lighthouse in 2019, Robert Eggers' extraordinary black and white psychological horror film, in which he co-starred with Willem Dafoe. His performance in this film is one of the finest of his career, wild, physical, psychologically complex, and completely fearless. And in 2022, he stepped into the role of Bruce Wayne in Batman in Matt Reeves' The Batman, a critically acclaimed reboot of the DC Comics franchise that demonstrated his ability to carry a major Hollywood blockbuster on entirely his own terms, on his own creative timeline. Personal life. Robert Pattinson's relationship with Kristen Stewart was one of the most intensely scrutinized celebrity relationships of the early 2010s. They were together for several years before separating in 2013. He has subsequently been in a long-term relationship with model and artist Suki Waterhouse, with whom he welcomed a daughter in 2024. Early career and the Harry Potter breakthrough. Robert's first significant professional role came in 2004 when he was cast as Cedric Diggory in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, the fourth installment in the massively successful Harry Potter film series. Cedric Diggory is one of the most important characters in Goblet of Fire, a kind, talented, and genuinely good young wizard who competes against Harry in the Triwizard Tournament, and who meets a tragic and shocking end at the hands of Voldemort in the film's devastating climax. Getting cast in Harry Potter at 17 was a remarkable achievement, and it placed Robert in one of the highest-profile film productions in the world. The Harry Potter films were cultural phenomena of extraordinary magnitude, and even a supporting role meant exposure to an audience of hundreds of millions. Robert brought a genuine warmth and dignity to Cedric Diggory. The character is noble and kind, and Robert found a way to make that nobility feel real and human rather than artificially perfect. His performance was well received, and Cedric Diggory's death in Goblet of Fire is one of the genuinely affecting moments in the entire Harry Potter series, partly because of the character's inherent goodness, and partly because Robert made the audience care about him in the relatively limited screen time he was given. After Harry Potter, Robert continued to work in British television and film. He appeared in Ring of the Nibelungs, a German television miniseries, in 2004. He appeared in The Haunted Airman, a BBC television film, in 2006, giving a performance that showed a darker, more psychologically complex range than Cedric Diggory had required. He was in The Bad Mother's Handbook in 2007, another British television production. He was beginning to build a career, but he had not yet found the role that would make him a global name. Twilight, the role that redefined everything. When the Twilight film entered production in 2007, the casting of Edward Cullen was one of the most intensely discussed decisions in Hollywood. Edward is a character of specific and unusual qualities. He is impossibly beautiful, physically cold, emotionally intense, deeply conflicted about his own nature, and possessed of a brooding, magnetic quality that is central to the entire romantic dynamic of the story. The Twilight fanbase, which was already enormous before the first film was even in production, had very definite ideas about who should and should not play Edward Cullen. When Robert Pattinson's name was announced as the casting choice, the initial reaction from a portion of the fanbase was negative. He was not, many fans argued, what they had imagined. What changed those opinions was the screen test. When audiences saw Robert and Kristen Stewart together in the audition footage that was eventually released, the chemistry was undeniable. And when the film itself came out in November 2008, Robert's performance as Edward silenced virtually all of the earlier skepticism. He had found something true and complex in the character, a quality of genuine pain and self-restraint that made Edward feel like a real, three-dimensional being rather than a romantic fantasy figure. The success of Twilight transformed Robert Pattinson's life with a speed and totality that is difficult to fully comprehend. He went from being a working British actor with a solid but unremarkable career to one of the most photographed and followed young men on the planet in a matter of months. The level of fan obsession was extraordinary even by Hollywood standards. He could barely appear in public without triggering scenes of near hysteria. He handled this new reality with a mixture of bemusement, discomfort, and dry British humor that endeared him to many observers even as it baffled some. Robert Pattinson, from Hogwarts to Hollywood royalty. Early life and origins. Robert Douglas Thomas Pattinson was born on May 13, 1986, in the Barnes area of southwest London, England, in the United Kingdom. He was born into a middle-class British family with an interesting and eclectic background. His father, Richard Pattinson, worked as a vintage car importer, sourcing and importing classic American cars into the United Kingdom, a business that gave the family a comfortable lifestyle and that gave young Robert an early and lasting appreciation for American culture and aesthetics. His mother, Claire Pattinson, worked for a modeling agency, which meant that the world of image and presentation was part of his upbringing in a certain sense, though not in the direct way of a performance household. Robert has two older sisters, Lizzie and Victoria, both of whom have had their own connections to the entertainment industry. Lizzie Pattinson, in particular, pursued a career as a musician and singer, and her musical talents were something that Robert shared. He taught himself to play guitar and piano from a young age, and music has remained a serious and genuine passion throughout his life. He grew up in London and attended the Tower House School, a private preparatory school in the Barnes area, before moving on to the Herodian School, an independent school in nearby London borough of Richmond upon Thames. He was, by his own later accounts, an unremarkable student academically, not because he lacked intelligence, which he clearly possesses in abundance, but because the conventional structure of academic education did not particularly engage him. What engaged him was performance, art, and the emotional and imaginative world of storytelling, finding acting, A teenage revelation, Robert Pattinson did not come to acting through the traditional route of childhood ambition and relentless auditions. He came to it more organically and in a specifically theatrical context. At the age of 15, he joined the Barnes Theatre Company, a local amateur dramatic group based in his neighborhood. This was a decision driven more by curiosity and the desire for a new experience than by any grand theatrical ambition. What happened next is one of those moments of genuine discovery. Robert found, the moment he stepped onto a stage, that performance came naturally to him in a way that almost nothing else had. He was good at it, not in a polished, technically trained way, but in a raw, instinctive way that drew people's attention and held it. The Barnes Theatre Company was where he began to understand that acting was not just something he could do, but something that genuinely excited him at a deep level. He appeared in several amateur productions with the company, developing his stage presence and beginning to learn the fundamentals of performance through practice. His talent was noticed by those around him, and he began to take the possibility of a professional acting career seriously. He signed with a talent agency and began the long, unglamorous process of professional auditions. Life after Twilight. An artist emerges in 2012, the same year as Breaking Dawn Part 2. Kristen starred in Snow White and the Huntsman, a large-scale fantasy action film in which she played Snow White. The same year, she starred in On the Road, Walter Salles' adaptation of Jack Kerouac's landmark novel, a project of enormous literary prestige. In 2014, she appeared in Clouds of Sils Maria, directed by Olivier Assayas, a French-language film about an aging actress and her personal assistant. Kristen's performance in this film won her the César Award, the French equivalent of the Academy Award, making her the first American actress ever to win that honor. This was a watershed moment in the critical reappraisal of her talent. She worked with Assayas again on Personal Shopper in 2016, another French-language film that earned her extraordinary critical acclaim, including a great deal of discussion about whether she had been overlooked for major awards recognition. Her work continued to grow in range and depth. She starred in Certain Women in 2016, Lizzie in 2018, Seberg in 2019, and Happiest Season in 2020. But perhaps the pinnacle of her post-Twilight career came with Spencer in 2021, in which she played Princess Diana of Wales during a pivotal Christmas weekend at the British royal family's Sandringham estate. Her performance was universally praised as one of the finest performances of that year by any actor. She was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actress, the first Oscar nomination of her career, and the nomination was met with wide agreement that it was richly deserved. She did not win, but the nomination itself represented the full completion of the arc from teenage franchise star to genuinely elite dramatic actress. Personal life. Kristen Stewart's personal life has been a subject of considerable public interest, in part due to the intense media scrutiny that accompanied her Twilight fame. Her relationship with Robert Pattinson, which began during the making of the Twilight films and which developed into a genuine romantic partnership, was one of the most followed celebrity relationships of the early 2010s. The relationship ended in 2013 amid circumstances that were painful and very public. In the years that followed, Kristen was open about her sexuality in a way that was groundbreaking for an actress of her profile. She began speaking publicly about her relationships with women, and in doing so became an important figure for LGBTQ visibility in mainstream Hollywood. She has been in several significant relationships with women, including the singer and model Stella Maxwell and the screenwriter Dylan Meyer, to whom she became engaged in 2021. Building a filmography. The years before Twilight, between Panic Room and the role that would make her a global star, Kristen Stewart worked on a range of films that demonstrated her commitment to diverse, often unconventional material. She appeared in films like Speak in 2004, an adaptation of the award-winning novel by Laurie Halse Anderson, in which she played a teenager dealing with the aftermath of trauma. This role required emotional depth and vulnerability that most teenage actresses would have found difficult to access, but Kristen brought to it a rawness and authenticity that earned her considerable critical praise. She appeared in Zathura, a space adventure in 2005, a fantasy adventure film directed by Jon Favreau that gave her a broader commercial platform. She was in Into the Wild in 2007, the Sean Penn-directed adaptation of Jon Krakauer's celebrated book about Christopher McCandless. Into the Wild is a film of considerable ambition and artistic integrity, and the fact that Kristen was chosen for a role in it at 17 speaks to the regard in which she was already held by filmmakers working at the highest level of independent and prestige cinema. She was also in The Messengers in 2007, a horror film that gave her experience in a genre she would later return to. And she appeared in Adventureland in 2009, a coming-of-age film set in the 1980s that is one of the most warmly regarded smaller films of that period. Throughout all of this work, what was consistent was her refusal to take the easy route. She was drawn to complex, psychologically rich material. She wanted to play characters who were not simple, not comfortable, not easy to categorize. And then, in 2007, she auditioned for the role that would change everything. Twilight and global stardom. When the Twilight film was being developed by Summit Entertainment, the casting of Bella Swan was the most critical creative decision the filmmakers would make. Bella is the emotional center of the entire story. Every scene, every conflict, every moment of drama is filtered through her perspective, her feelings, her choices. Getting Bella wrong would mean getting everything wrong, Kristen read with Robert Pattinson in a now legendary audition that took place at the home of the film's director, Catherine Hardwicke. The chemistry between them was undeniable and immediate. There was something electric and authentic in the way they interacted, something that could not be manufactured or coached. Kristen was cast as Bella Swan, and the Twilight Saga became the framework within which she would spend the next several years of her life and career. The original Twilight was released in November 2008 and became an enormous cultural phenomenon almost overnight. The film earned hundreds of millions of dollars at the global box office, and Kristen Stewart went from being a well-regarded young actress known primarily within the industry to a genuine global celebrity. The adjustment was not always easy. Kristen has spoken at length in interviews over the years about the difficulty of the level of fame that the Twilight films brought, the complete loss of privacy, the constant media attention, the paparazzi, the obsessive fan culture. She is, by temperament, a private and introspective person, and sudden global fame sits uneasily on people like that. She navigated 4 subsequent Twilight films over the following years: New Moon, Eclipse, Breaking Dawn Part 1, and Breaking Dawn Part 2, while simultaneously pursuing an active parallel career in non-franchise films. This parallel career is one of the most interesting things about Kristen Stewart's trajectory during the Twilight years, because while many actors in similar franchise situations essentially paused their broader career development, she was doing exactly the opposite. The actors of Breaking Dawn Part 1, Complete Life History's Kristen Stewart, the girl who became an icon early life and childhood. Kristen James Stewart was born on April 9, 1990, in Los Angeles, California, United States of America. She was born into a family that was deeply embedded in the entertainment industry, which meant that her path toward acting, while still the result of her own talent and drive, was shaped from the very beginning by an environment that understood and supported the craft. Her father, Jon Stewart, worked as a stage manager and television producer, having spent years behind the scenes of various productions in the American television industry. Her mother, Jules Mann Stewart, was a script supervisor originally from Australia, and she too had spent the majority of her professional life working on film and television sets. Growing up in the Stewart household meant growing up around cameras, sets, scripts, and the practical machinery of filmmaking. Kristen and her brothers, she has 3 brothers, 1 biological and 2 adopted, were raised in a home where the entertainment industry was not a distant, glamorous world but simply the background of daily life. Her father's work in television and her mother's work in film meant that Kristen was comfortable around production environments from a very young age. She did not grow up starstruck by Hollywood because Hollywood was, in a practical sense, just where her parents went to work. Kristen attended school in the Los Angeles area, but her education was never entirely conventional. As her acting career began to develop in her early years, she increasingly relied on on-set tutors and homeschooling arrangements to keep up with her academic requirements, while also meeting the demands of her work schedule. She was, by all accounts, a focused and intelligent student, though her primary passion was always the creative work of acting rather than traditional academic pursuits. As a child, Kristen was notably not the kind of child who sought attention or performance opportunities in everyday settings. She was not, by nature, a show-off. She was described by those who knew her as a quiet, introspective, somewhat private child who thought deeply about things and who expressed herself more through observation and internalization than through extroversion. This quality, this deep inner life combined with a reluctance to perform for social approval, would become one of the most defining characteristics of her work as an actress. The beginning of a career. Child actor finding her voice. Kristen Stewart's formal acting career began when she was quite young, around the age of 8 or 9. It started not through any grand plan or deliberate strategy, but through a school play. A talent agent happened to be in attendance at one of her school productions and was struck by something in the way this particular child carried herself on stage. Not a conventional theatrical presence, but something quieter and more authentic, something that the camera tends to love even when traditional theatrical training might not fully appreciate it. She began auditioning for roles, and while the early years involved many rejections and smaller opportunities that never fully materialized, she was developing the thick skin and the persistent dedication that a career in acting requires. Her first significant professional work came through small television appearances, including a role in a Disney Channel production. But it was quickly clear to those who worked with her that she was not a conventional child performer. She did not have the polished, eager-to-please quality of the typical child actor. She had something rawer and more genuine, and that quality required the right material to truly shine. Her first major film role came in 2002 when she was cast in Panic Room, directed by the acclaimed filmmaker David Fincher. This was an extraordinary opportunity for any actor, let alone one who was just 11 years old at the time. Panic Room is a tense, claustrophobic thriller starring Jodie Foster as a woman who must protect herself and her daughter, played by Kristen, from intruders who have broken into their home. Being directed by David Fincher at the age of 11, and starring opposite Jodie Foster, one of the most respected actresses in American cinema, was an experience that shaped Kristen's approach to her craft in fundamental ways. Fincher is known as a demanding, meticulous director who pushes his actors toward authenticity through exhaustive repetition and precise attention to detail. Learning to work under those conditions at such a young age gave Kristen a foundation that few child actors ever receive. Her performance in Panic Room was noticed by critics and industry professionals, and it opened doors to further opportunities. Throughout the mid-2000s, she worked consistently in both film and television, building a body of work that was varied and increasingly impressive. The transformation, death and rebirth inside the house. Bella lies motionless. To every observable measurement, she is dead. Her heart has stopped. She is not breathing. The damage to her body has been too great, the transformation has come too late. Edward sits beside her, holding her hand, speaking to her in a voice so quiet and broken that it is almost unbearable to witness. He will not accept it. He cannot accept it. He continues to talk to her, willing her back with the force of everything he is. The rest of the family gathers. Rosalie holds Renesmee, feeding her and soothing her. Jacob stands apart, still reeling from the imprinting, his face a war between grief for Bella and the new, overwhelming devotion that has just changed the fundamental orientation of his heart. And then, almost imperceptibly, something begins to happen. The bruises on Bella's skin begin to fade. The cuts begin to close. The sickly pallor of her skin starts to change, transforming into something different, not the warm pinkish tone of human skin, but the cooler, smoother perfection of vampire skin. The bones that were broken knit themselves back together with tiny, audible sounds. Her body is healing itself, not recovering to what it was before, but transforming into something new and extraordinary. The camera moves slowly across her face in these final moments of the film, watching the change happen in real time. The lines of pain that have marked her face for weeks smooth away. Her lips become fuller, more defined. Her skin becomes luminous. And finally, unmistakably, after everything she has been through, the choice she made, the love she committed to, the suffering she endured, the child she fought to bring into the world, Bella Swan's eyes open. They are red. Vivid, deep, unmistakable red. The eyes of a newborn vampire, burning with the intensity of transformation and new existence. Bella Swan is dead. And from the place where she used to be, something new and powerful and eternal has come into the world. The film ends here, on that image, those red eyes, open and aware, looking out at a world that Bella can now perceive with supernatural clarity for the very first time. Closing thoughts on the story. What makes the story of Breaking Dawn Part 1 so compelling, when stripped down to its essential elements, is that it is fundamentally a story about love expressed through sacrifice. Every major character in the film is in some way defined by what they are willing to give up for someone else. Bella gives up her human life without regret. Edward gives up his certainty and his control out of love for his wife. Jacob gives up his own claim on Bella's heart and stands guard over the family of the woman he loves, even though it costs him everything. Rosalie gives up her coldness and her resentment and becomes a protector. Charlie gives up his daughter with quiet, dignified grace. The pregnancy at the center of the story is simultaneously a source of horror and wonder. It is killing Bella even as it creates something beautiful. It forces every character to confront what they truly value and what they are truly made of. And it ends not with death but with transformation, which is, in many ways, the true theme of the entire Twilight Saga. Every significant moment in Bella's story has been about becoming something more than what she was. In Breaking Dawn Part 1, she becomes a mother. She becomes a wife in the fullest sense. And finally, she becomes something beyond human altogether, ready, at last, for the eternity that awaits her. Bella's darkest hours. The price of love. As the days pass inside the Cullen house, Bella's condition worsens at a terrifying pace. The baby inside her is not just growing, it is consuming her. Her ribs crack under the force of the baby's kicks. She cannot eat normal food because her stomach can no longer tolerate it. She is essentially starving while the baby grows stronger. It is Edward who makes a suggestion that no one else has considered, or perhaps that no one else was willing to voice. If the baby is half vampire, perhaps it needs what vampires need. Perhaps it needs blood. They obtain blood and offer it to Bella in a cup, and she drinks it. The effect is almost immediate. The nausea eases. She is able to keep it down. The baby, as if responding to finally receiving proper nourishment, becomes calmer. Bella herself seems steadier, more present, more like herself than she has been in days. This becomes the new routine. Bella drinks blood to sustain herself and the baby, while the Cullen family watches over her with a mixture of relief and grief. Relief because she is surviving. Grief because what she is going through is still extraordinary and frightening, and because the end point of all this is still deeply uncertain. During this period, there are quiet, tender moments between Bella and Edward that give the story some of its most emotionally resonant beats. They lie together in their room at the Cullen house, and Edward presses his ear to Bella's swollen belly, listening to the baby's thoughts. Because Edward can read minds, and the baby, even in the womb, is already thinking. What he hears astonishes him. He tells Bella that the baby already knows her, already loves her. This moment breaks through Edward's terror and grief and gives him, for the first time, a genuine connection to the child they are bringing into the world together. Bella has decided on names. If the baby is a girl, she will be named Renesmee, a combination of Renee, Bella's mother, and Esme, Edward's adoptive mother. If the baby is a boy, he will be named E.J., Edward Jacob, a name that carries within it both the love Bella has for her husband and the love she has for her dearest friend. The birth, chaos, courage, and a new life. The end comes suddenly and violently, as the most dramatic events in life often do. Bella is moving carefully through the house one day when she stumbles and falls. When she tries to get up, something has gone terribly wrong. She is in labor, weeks before even the accelerated timeline they had been tracking. The baby is coming now, and it is coming in crisis. The scene that follows is one of the most intense and emotionally overwhelming sequences in the entire Twilight film series. Bella is in agony, her body barely holding together. Carlisle is not in the house. He has gone out and cannot be reached in time. Edward and Rosalie do what they can, but the situation is deteriorating rapidly. Bella's spine cracks. Her body is failing. The baby must come out now or both of them will die. Edward, with Rosalie's assistance, performs an emergency cesarean section using his teeth, the only instrument sharp and strong enough to cut through what Bella's skin has become under the influence of the baby's supernatural nature. Jacob, hearing the sounds of crisis from outside, rushes into the house. What he witnesses inside is barely coherent: blood, chaos, Bella's broken body on the table, Edward working desperately and with total focus. Jacob takes his place at Bella's side and holds her hand, talking to her, keeping her with him, refusing to let her slip away. She is barely conscious. She is in tremendous pain. But she is holding on. Renesmee is born. She is perfect, dark-haired, bright-eyed, already inexplicably aware and present in a way no newborn should be. For a moment, with the baby in the room, everything pauses. Then the reality of Bella's condition reasserts itself with brutal clarity. Her heart is slowing. The damage to her body from the birth is catastrophic. Edward injects venom directly from a syringe into her heart, then bites her repeatedly across her body, desperately trying to flood her system with enough venom to trigger the transformation that might save her life. Jacob, believing that Bella is going to die, that she is already essentially dead, is overcome with a grief so violent it almost transforms into rage. He looks at Renesmee, the baby he instinctively blames for what has happened to the woman he loves, and he moves toward her with a terrible intention. And then it happens. Jacob imprints. He looks at Renesmee, and the entire universe reorganizes itself around that one small face. Every feeling he has ever had, every attachment, every desire, all of it reshapes and refocuses into a single, overwhelming, completely pure devotion to this child. It is not romantic. It is not possessive. It is simply the most total and unconditional form of love and protectiveness that exists in the Twilight universe, an involuntary, soul-deep bond that cannot be broken and cannot be resisted. Jacob's intention dissolves in an instant. Renesmee is, from this moment, the most important being in the world to him. Outside the house, Sam's pack is preparing to attack. Seth and Leah hold them at bay, but the standoff is reaching its breaking point. When Sam's wolves learn that Jacob has imprinted on the Cullen child, however, everything changes. The laws of the wolf pack are absolute. No wolf may harm the imprinted of another. Renesmee is now untouchable by pack law. The threat from Sam dissolves as suddenly as it arose. The war that seemed inevitable is over before it truly began. The Cullen house. A pregnancy without precedent. Carlyle examines Bella and confirms what she has suspected. She is pregnant. The baby is growing inside her at a rate that defies all medical understanding, a rate that is not human. Because the child is not fully human. It is half human and half vampire, a being that has no precedent in any record or history that the Cullen family can access. They contact other vampires with whom they have relationships, searching for any documentation of such a case. They find a few scattered references, enough to understand that such pregnancies have occurred before, though rarely, and that they are extraordinarily dangerous for the human mother. The family is immediately plunged into conflict. The pregnancy is progressing so rapidly that within days of returning to Forks, Bella's belly is visibly swollen in a way that would take a normal human pregnancy months to produce. And the growth is not slowing, it is accelerating. The baby is drawing on Bella's body for sustenance, taking what it needs with the relentless, unthinking hunger of something that does not yet understand what it is consuming. Bella is losing weight from every part of her body except her abdomen. She is becoming thin, then gaunt, then skeletal. Rosalie Hale, who has throughout the earlier films been cold and resentful toward Bella, undergoes a remarkable transformation in this story. Rosalie has always longed for a child. It is the one human experience that was taken from her when she was turned into a vampire, and the idea of a baby, Bella's baby, fills her with a fierce protectiveness that overrides every other concern. She becomes Bella's most devoted guardian within the house, willing to fight any member of her own family who threatens the pregnancy. Edward, however, is consumed by terror for his wife. He watches her deteriorating before his eyes, and the horror of what is happening to her pushes him toward a position he never expected to hold. He wants the pregnancy terminated. He cannot bear to watch Bella suffer, cannot bear the thought of losing her, and is willing to do whatever is necessary to save her life, even if it means ending the pregnancy. He calls Jacob, reaching out to his most significant rival and enemy because Bella trusts Jacob in a way that is unique and deeply rooted, and Edward hopes that Jacob can reach her where Edward cannot. Jacob comes, despite his own pain, because the love he has for Bella is the kind that ultimately expresses itself through sacrifice and service rather than possession. He sits with Bella and he sees immediately how much she has changed. She is thin, fragile, almost translucent. But her eyes are clear and her voice is steady, and when she talks about the baby, there is no ambivalence in her. She already loves this child. She already thinks of herself as its mother. And she is not going to give it up. Jacob tries to reason with her. Edward tries to plead with her. The rest of the family argues back and forth. Bella listens to all of it, and then quietly, calmly, without anger or defensiveness, says no. The decision is hers, and she has made it. The wolf pack. A new war approaches meanwhile. Outside the walls of the Cullen house, the situation is becoming dangerous from a completely different direction. The wolf pack, led by Sam Yulee, has become aware of Bella's pregnancy and of the nature of the child she is carrying. In the world of the Quileute wolves, the vampires are the enemy, the creatures that the wolf shapeshifters exist to oppose and destroy. The idea of a half-vampire hybrid child represents something that goes beyond normal threat in Sam's mind. It represents an abomination, something that should not exist, something that must be eliminated before it can become a danger. Sam calls a meeting of the pack and makes a decision. They will kill Bella Swan and destroy the unborn child. They will attack the Cullen house if necessary. This is a declaration of war. Jacob refuses. His love for Bella and his loyalty to her override the authority of his pack alpha. For the first time in his experience as a wolf, he challenges Sam's right to give this order. In the mythology of the Twilight universe, a wolf can break from the pack if they have the bloodline to assert their own alpha status, and Jacob, as the direct descendant of the original pack leader Ephraim Black, has exactly that. He breaks away, and with him goes Seth Clearwater and Seth's older sister Leah, who has her own complicated reasons for wanting to be free of Sam's leadership. Jacob's small, newly formed pack takes up positions around the perimeter of the Cullen property, working in uneasy cooperation with the Cullen vampires to hold Sam's larger pack at bay. It is a strange and historically unprecedented alliance, wolves and vampires standing together, and the tension of it runs underneath every scene that takes place at the Cullen house during this period. Leah Clearwater is particularly interesting during this stretch of the story. She is fierce, guarded, and carries a great deal of pain beneath her hardened exterior. She has had her own heartbreak. She and Sam were in love before Sam imprinted on her cousin Emily, and that loss changed her profoundly. She does not love Bella Swan and does not particularly want to be protecting her, but she is loyal to Jacob and she is free from Sam, and for now that is enough. Al-Esme, Paradise, and its hidden darkness. After the wedding, Bella and Edward begin their honeymoon journey. They travel to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, arriving in the golden afternoon light of one of the world's most stunning cities. From there, a boat takes them across shimmering water to their final destination, Al-Esme, a private island belonging to the Cullen family, named in honor of Edward's adoptive mother. It is a paradise in every sense of the word. Dense tropical greenery crowds right to the edge of powdery white sand beaches. The water is a shade of blue and green that seems almost unreal. The villa on the island is open, airy, and beautiful, with gauzy curtains and the constant sound of the ocean. For Bella, arriving at this place on her wedding night is almost overwhelming. She is excited, nervous, and deeply in love, and all of those emotions are written openly on her face. Edward, for his part, is tender and patient, encouraging her to take her time, not wanting to rush any part of this night. Bella slips away to the bathroom to prepare herself, and when she looks at her reflection in the mirror, there is a new quality of certainty in her expression. This is what she wants, and she is ready. Their first night together as a married couple is depicted with restraint and sensitivity. The camera stays tasteful, the lighting is soft, and the emotional weight of the moment is conveyed through the actors' expressions and the quiet intensity between them rather than through explicit imagery. What the audience understands is that something significant and beautiful has happened between two people who are deeply in love. Morning brings a very different atmosphere. Bella wakes to find the bedroom in disarray. Feathers from the torn pillows are scattered everywhere, floating gently in the breeze from the open window. When she looks at her own arms and shoulders, she sees bruises, not terrible, not agonizing, but unmistakably there, left by Edward's superhuman strength even when he was doing everything possible to be gentle. She does not feel hurt. She feels happy, wonderfully happy. But when Edward sees the bruises, he is stricken with guilt. His response is to immediately and firmly declare that he will not touch her again. He blames himself entirely, regardless of Bella's insistence that she is completely fine and that she does not hold him responsible. This becomes a source of gentle, persistent tension between them during the early days of their honeymoon. Bella is frustrated by Edward's self-imposed restraint, and Edward is torn between his desire and his fear of hurting her. They fill their honeymoon days with other pleasures. They swim in the ocean, though Bella notices that Edward spends most of his time watching her rather than swimming himself, an old habit of vigilant protection that he cannot quite shake even in paradise. They play chess on the veranda in the evenings. They eat meals prepared by the small household staff who have been arranged to look after the island. They talk for hours, learning new things about each other even after everything they have been through together. But Bella is persistent, and over the days that follow, she finds ways to convince Edward to let go of his guilt and simply be with her. And for a time, the honeymoon settles into something genuinely idyllic. Two young people in love, alone on a beautiful island, with nothing demanding their attention except each other. Then Bella begins to feel sick. It starts gradually. She is nauseous in the mornings. She finds that food she previously enjoyed turns her stomach. She is tired in a way that seems out of proportion to how much she is sleeping. When she goes to pack her things for their eventual return to Forks, she finds her bag of personal items and realizes, with a jolt of shock that spreads through her entire body, that something she expected to find is not there. Her menstrual cycle, which should have come by now, has not. She stands in the bathroom staring at herself in the mirror, her mind racing through the impossible arithmetic of what this might mean. She places her hand flat against her abdomen and looks down. And when she looks up, she notices something she missed before, a very faint, barely perceptible rounding of her belly. Too small to be certain. Too present to be dismissed. She calls Edward into the bathroom, and when she explains what she has realized, his response is immediate and disbelieving. It is not possible, he tells her. Vampires cannot father children. It is biologically impossible. But Bella's body is telling her something different, and the evidence is accumulating in ways that cannot be explained away. They cut the honeymoon short and return immediately to Forks, to the Cullen family, to Carlyle, who is not only a loving father figure, but a highly skilled physician with centuries of medical knowledge. The Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn Part 1, complete story in detail. The beginning, a decision that changes everything. The story of Breaking Dawn Part 1 begins not with grand action or explosive conflict, but with something far more intimate and personal. A young woman standing at the crossroads of two completely different lives, about to choose one of them permanently and leave the other behind forever. Bella Swan is 18 years old. She lives in the small, rain-soaked town of Forks, Washington, where she moved to live with her father, Charlie Swan, after her mother Renee remarried and relocated. It was in Forks that Bella's entire world changed when she fell in love with Edward Cullen, a vampire who has existed for over a century and who, along with his adoptive family, has been living among humans in secret. Over the course of the previous 3 films in the saga, Bella and Edward's relationship has been tested by danger, jealousy, separation, and the complicated presence of Jacob Black, a young Quileute man who is also a werewolf and who is deeply in love with Bella. Now, as Breaking Dawn Part 1 opens, the decision has been made. Bella has chosen Edward. She has accepted his marriage proposal. And she has agreed, once they are married, to eventually be transformed into a vampire so that she can be with Edward not just for a lifetime, but for eternity. For Bella, this is not a sacrifice, it is a conscious, deeply considered choice. For those around her, however, it is a source of profound anxiety, grief, and conflict. The film opens with wedding invitations being sent out. One finds its way to Jacob Black, who is living deep in the forest, having run away from his pack and from the pain of Bella's choice. When he receives the invitation, his reaction is one of raw, unbearable grief. He crumples it, and the scene is a quiet but powerful reminder that for every joyful beginning, someone else is experiencing a heartbreaking ending. The wedding, A dream realized under a canopy of flowers. The wedding preparations unfold with a warmth and elegance that feels somewhat removed from the darker, moodier aesthetic of the earlier Twilight films. Alice Cullen, Edward's adoptive sister and Bella's closest vampire friend, has taken charge of the event with characteristic enthusiasm and impeccable taste. The Cullen property has been transformed into something truly magical. Garlands of white flowers drape across trees, soft lighting glows through the forest canopy, and hundreds of chairs are arranged in neat rows for the guests. Bella spends the morning of her wedding day in a quiet, reflective mood. She has a recurring dream the night before, a vision of herself and Edward standing atop a mountain of bodies, surrounded by darkness, which unsettles her briefly. But in the daylight, surrounded by the warmth of Alice and Rosalie helping her prepare, she pushes those thoughts aside. Her wedding dress is a work of breathtaking elegance, long-sleeved, with a deep V-back, delicate lace detailing, and a long flowing train. When she sees herself in the mirror, fully dressed and ready, she looks like someone who belongs not to the ordinary human world she is leaving behind, but to the extraordinary life she is stepping into. Charlie Swan, dressed in his finest suit and visibly emotional, walks Bella down the makeshift aisle between the rows of seated guests. He is doing his best to be brave, to be supportive, to be the kind of father who trusts his daughter's choices even when he does not fully understand them. His expression as he hands Bella over to Edward is one of the most quietly heartbreaking moments in the film, the look of a man letting go of his daughter for the last time in the truest sense. Edward, standing at the altar waiting for her, is overwhelmed. For a being who has lived for over 100 years and who has seen almost everything, seeing Bella walk toward him in her wedding dress leaves him visibly stunned and moved. Their eyes meet, and the rest of the world falls away. The ceremony is conducted with dignity and grace. Their vows are personal, heartfelt, and spoken with complete sincerity. When they say their final words to each other and are pronounced husband and wife, the assembled guests erupt in quiet, joyful celebration. The wedding reception that follows is lively and warm. There is dancing, laughter, toasts from family and friends. Emmett and Jasper tease Edward with brotherly affection. Charlie dances with Bella, holding on just a little longer than necessary. Renee, Bella's mother, watches her daughter with a mixture of happiness and wistfulness that every parent in the audience can understand. But the tone of the reception shifts meaningfully when Jacob Black arrives. He has come despite everything, despite the pain, despite the heartbreak, despite the knowledge that the woman he loves has chosen another. He comes because he cannot stay away, because some part of him needed to see her one more time, to say something, to be there even if his being there hurts. Bella and Jacob steal a quiet moment together on the edge of the reception. Their conversation is tender and aching. Bella tells Jacob something that she perhaps should have kept to herself, that she and Edward plan to spend their honeymoon as humans, that they will be together as a husband and wife in the full physical sense before she is ever turned into a vampire. Jacob's reaction is immediate and visceral. The idea fills him with terror not out of jealousy alone, but out of genuine fear. He knows how strong Edward is, and the idea of Edward being intimate with a fragile human woman strikes him as deeply dangerous. His fury rises fast, and he grabs Bella's arm, and it takes Seth and Quill from the wolf pack physically pulling him away to stop the confrontation from escalating. Jacob disappears into the night, and Bella watches him go with sadness in her eyes before returning to the warmth of her wedding reception. And that is your complete, in-depth breakdown of the Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn Part 1 from 2011. We covered the overview, the full plot, the cast, the release details, and everything in between. This film remains a standout moment in early 2010s cinema and continues to hold a very special place in the hearts of millions of fans around the world. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please make sure to give it a like. It genuinely helps this channel grow and lets us know that you want more content like this. If you are new here and you enjoyed watching, please consider subscribing to the channel so you never miss a video. And if you have a friend who is also a fan of the Twilight Saga, share this video with them. Let them relive the magic of Breaking Dawn all over again. The cast of Breaking Dawn Part 1 is anchored by the same trio of stars who carried the entire saga from its beginning. Kristen Stewart plays Bella Swan, the protagonist of the story. Stewart gives one of her most physically demanding performances in this film, having to portray Bella's rapid physical deterioration during the pregnancy in a believable and heartbreaking way. Her commitment to the role is evident throughout. Robert Pattinson plays Edward Cullen, the vampire who loves Bella. Pattinson brings a depth of anguish to Edward in this film that is particularly compelling. His character is tormented by the possibility of losing Bella, and Pattinson conveys that weight effectively. Taylor Lautner plays Jacob Black, the werewolf who is also deeply in love with Bella. Lautner handles some of the film's most emotionally complex scenes with maturity, particularly the moments where Jacob must confront his own feelings while choosing to protect Bella even against the wishes of his pack. Billy Burke plays Charlie Swan, Bella's father, bringing warmth and subtle emotion to his limited but important screen time. Peter Facinelli plays Carlisle Cullen, the family patriarch and physician, who anchors many of the film's more medically dramatic scenes. Elizabeth Reeser plays Esme Cullen with quiet grace. Nikki Reed plays Rosalie Hale, and in this film Rosalie becomes a much more prominent and sympathetic character than she has been in previous installments, due to her fierce protectiveness of Bella and Renesmee. Jackson Rathbone plays Jasper Hale, Ashley Greene plays Alice Cullen, and Kellen Lutz plays Emmett Cullen, all reprising their roles from the earlier films. Gil Birmingham returns as Billy Black, Jacob's father. Anna Kendrick, Christian Serratos, and Michael Welch reprise their roles as Bella's human school friends Jessica, Angela, and Mike, providing brief but welcome moments of levity at the wedding reception. Mackenzie Foy plays Renesmee Cullen in a brief but memorable appearance in this film, a role she would expand significantly in Part 2. The Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn Part 1 had its world premiere on November 14, 2011, at the Nokia Theater in Los Angeles, California. It was released theatrically in the United States on November 18, 2011. The film was released internationally around the same timeframe, opening in markets across the world in November 2011. The box office performance of the film was extraordinary. On its opening weekend in the United States, it earned approximately $138 million, making it one of the biggest opening weekends in the history of the Twilight franchise. Globally, the film went on to gross over $710 million worldwide against a production budget of approximately $110 million, making it a massive financial success and one of the highest-grossing films of 2011. The official theatrical trailer for Breaking Dawn Part 1 was released in the summer of 2011 and was met with enormous enthusiasm from the fanbase. It showcased the wedding sequence, the honeymoon on Isle Esme, and gave glimpses of Bella's supernatural pregnancy without fully revealing the extent of what happens. The trailer was deliberately constructed to emphasize the romantic and dramatic elements of the story while holding back enough to keep audiences curious and eager. Summit Entertainment launched a major marketing campaign for the film, including promotional partnerships, merchandise, and extensive media coverage of the cast. The film was one of the most anticipated releases of 2011, and fan excitement was at an all-time high given that this was the beginning of the end of the beloved saga. Critically, the film received mixed reviews, as had been the pattern with the Twilight films throughout. Some critics praised Bill Condon's direction, the visual beauty of the honeymoon sequences, and the performances of the leads. Others felt the pacing was uneven and that the first half of the film moved slowly. However, among fans of the saga, the film was embraced enthusiastically and is considered by many in the fanbase to be one of the stronger entries in the series, largely due to its emotional stakes and the dramatic pregnancy storyline. The film holds a significant place in pop culture history as part of one of the defining franchises of the late 2000s and early 2010s. The Twilight Saga as a whole generated billions of dollars in box office revenue, sparked an enormous publishing phenomenon, and made household names of its three lead stars. Breaking Dawn Part 1, as the penultimate chapter, carries the emotional weight of a story nearing its conclusion, and for fans who had followed Bella's journey from the very beginning, it was an incredibly meaningful and emotional viewing experience. Now let us get into the story itself, and this is where things get really interesting. The plot of Breaking Dawn Part 1 picks up right where Eclipse left off. Bella Swan has accepted Edward Cullen's marriage proposal, and the film opens with preparations for their wedding. The opening minutes establish the emotional weight of what is about to happen. Bella is about to marry a vampire, leave her human life behind, and eventually be turned into a vampire herself. She is aware of the consequences, and the audience feels that tension immediately. The wedding sequence is one of the most visually stunning parts of the film. It takes place in the lush forest behind the Cullen family's home in Forks, Washington. The ceremony is intimate yet grand, filled with beautiful floral arrangements and soft lighting that gives the whole sequence a dreamlike, almost ethereal quality. Bella walks down the aisle in a stunning long-sleeved wedding gown designed by Carolina Herrera, and Edward waits for her, looking completely overwhelmed with emotion. Their vows are heartfelt, and the moment is genuinely moving, even for viewers who are not die-hard fans of the series. Charlie Swan, Bella's father, gives her away, and there is a bittersweet quality to his expression throughout, knowing that his daughter is stepping into a world he does not fully understand. At the wedding reception, there are moments of lightness and humor, particularly from the human characters like Jessica and Mike, who provide comic relief. However, the tone shifts when Jacob Black arrives unexpectedly. Bella tells Jacob that she and Edward plan to spend their honeymoon as humans before she is turned, meaning they will be intimate as a human couple. Jacob's reaction is one of fury and anguish. He is devastated by the idea and has to be physically restrained by his wolf pack brothers Seth and Quill before he leaves the reception in emotional turmoil. The honeymoon takes place on Isle Esme, a private island off the coast of Brazil owned by the Cullen family and named after Edward's adoptive mother, Esme. This location serves as one of the most visually beautiful settings in the entire Twilight film series. The island is tropical, lush, and breathtaking, with turquoise waters and white sand beaches. The sequence of Bella and Edward arriving at the island and settling into their honeymoon villa is shot with a warmth and romanticism that feels very different from the cooler, more muted tones of the Pacific Northwest settings used elsewhere in the saga. Their first night together as a married couple is handled tastefully but with enough emotional and physical implication to feel significant. The morning after, Bella wakes up to find feathers everywhere from the pillows, and bruises on her arms and body from Edward's superhuman strength. Edward is horrified by this and blames himself, immediately refusing to be intimate with her again out of fear of hurting her further. Bella, on the other hand, insists she is fine and is not upset, leading to considerable tension between them as they navigate this delicate new dynamic. Their honeymoon continues, and they find ways to enjoy each other's company, playing chess, swimming, exploring the island. However, the idyllic setting is disrupted when Bella begins to feel ill. She notices that her menstrual cycle is late, and it slowly dawns on her, and on the audience, that she may be pregnant. This is a stunning revelation because vampires are not supposed to be capable of reproduction. Edward refuses to believe it at first, but the evidence becomes undeniable. They return immediately to Forks, where Carlisle Cullen, the Cullen family patriarch and a physician, confirms what Bella feared and hoped simultaneously: she is pregnant. The pregnancy, however, is progressing at an alarming rate. Within days, her belly is significantly swollen, and the fetus is growing at a supernatural speed. The child inside her is half human and half vampire, a hybrid that has never been documented before, and its nature is completely unknown. The pregnancy becomes the central conflict of the second half of the film. The Cullen family is deeply divided on what to do. Rosalie, who has always harbored resentment toward Bella but has also always longed for a child of her own, sides fiercely with Bella and becomes her protector, refusing to allow anyone to harm the baby. Esme and Emmett largely support Rosalie's position. However, others in the family are gravely concerned that the fetus may be killing Bella from the inside, which it essentially is, as Bella deteriorates, physically at a terrifying pace, losing weight dramatically, becoming pale and skeletal, and coughing up blood. Edward, consumed by guilt and terror for Bella's life, contacts Jacob and asks him to come to the Cullen house. He reveals to Jacob the truth about the pregnancy, hoping that Jacob, as Bella's close friend, can convince her to terminate the pregnancy and save her own life. Jacob comes and tries to reason with Bella, but Bella is absolutely resolute. She has already formed a bond with the child inside her and refuses to give up on it. Meanwhile, the wolf pack, led by Sam Yulee, becomes aware of the pregnancy and views the unborn hybrid child as a threat, an abomination that must be destroyed. Sam orders the pack to kill both Bella and the unborn child. Jacob refuses this order, breaking from the pack and forming his own small group with Seth Clearwater and his sister Leah Clearwater. Jacob's splinter group works alongside the Cullens to protect Bella and the house from Sam's pack, setting up a tense standoff. As Bella's condition worsens, she begins drinking blood, which Edward provides, and this actually helps sustain her and the baby. The baby kicks so violently that it breaks Bella's ribs. The situation reaches a breaking point when Bella goes into labor. The birth sequence is one of the most intense and graphic moments in the entire Twilight film series. It is chaotic, desperate, and frightening. The baby cannot be born conventionally, so Carlisle must perform an emergency cesarean section. Bella's body is failing rapidly, and Edward bites her repeatedly, injecting his venom into her bloodstream in a frantic attempt to begin the transformation to save her life. The baby, a girl named Renesmee, a combination of the names Renee and Esme, is born. She is healthy and beautiful, with brown eyes and a ring of dark hair. Jacob, who has been waiting outside in despair, rushes in expecting the worst, believing Bella has died. He intends to kill the baby as an act of vengeance, but the moment he sees Renesmee, something completely unexpected happens. He imprints on her. In the Twilight universe, imprinting is the term used for the involuntary and deeply profound bond a werewolf forms with someone, a bond that transcends romantic love and is essentially a soul connection. Jacob's imprinting on Renesmee means he can never harm her, and it also means that the conflict between him and the Cullen family is effectively resolved, because he is now bound to protect her above all else. Meanwhile, Edward injects a syringe full of his own venom directly into Bella's heart in a desperate, last-ditch effort to save her. For agonizing moments, it appears to have come too late. Bella appears to be dead. Edward is in pieces. But then, in the film's closing moments, we see Bella's body beginning to heal itself from the inside. Her bones knit back together. Her bruises fade. Her emaciated frame fills out. And in the final shot of the film, Bella's eyes open, and they are blood red. The transformation is complete. Bella Swan is now a vampire. The Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn Part 1 is an American romantic fantasy film that serves as the fourth installment in the Twilight Saga film series. The movie is based on the novel Breaking Dawn, written by Stephenie Meyer, which was published in 2008 as the fourth and final book in her enormously popular Twilight series. The film was produced in the United States of America and is an American production through and through, backed by Summit Entertainment, which was the studio responsible for distributing the entire Twilight Saga film series. The film was directed by Bill Condon, a highly accomplished filmmaker known for his work on movies like Dreamgirls and Gods and Monsters, for which he won an Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay. His appointment as director was seen as a significant creative choice, as the studio wanted someone with the maturity and dramatic sensibility to handle the more adult and emotionally complex themes present in the Breaking Dawn novel. Condon brought a more cinematic and visually lush quality to this installment compared to some of its predecessors, and that decision paid off both artistically and commercially. The screenplay for Breaking Dawn Part 1 was written by Melissa Rosenberg, who had penned all of the previous Twilight film scripts as well. Her familiarity with the source material and the characters made her the natural choice to adapt what was the most emotionally intense and narratively complex entry in the saga. The novel Breaking Dawn was considered so long and so rich in story that the decision was made early on to split it into two films, Breaking Dawn Part 1 and Breaking Dawn Part 2, similar to what other major franchises like Harry Potter had done with their final installments. The film was produced by Wick Godfrey and Karen Rosenfeld, with Stephenie Meyer herself serving as an executive producer. The cinematography was handled by Guillermo Navarro, a celebrated director of photography known for his rich visual style. The music score was composed by Carter Burwell, who had scored the original Twilight film and returned here to bring emotional depth and atmosphere to the narrative. This movie sits in the genres of romance, fantasy, and drama. It is rated PG-13 for disturbing images, violence, sexuality, and partial nudity. The film carries a runtime of approximately 117 minutes, making it a solid theatrical experience. The Isle Esme honeymoon shoot, beautiful location, practical chaos. The honeymoon sequences were filmed partly on location in Brazil and partly on constructed sets in Louisiana, and the combination of a genuinely exotic and beautiful real-world location with the practical challenges of international film production created numerous situations that were funny in retrospect if not always in the moment. Filming in Brazil meant dealing with the local weather, which did not always cooperate with the production schedule. It meant managing the logistics of an entire film crew in a foreign country, dealing with language differences, equipment transport across international borders, and the general organizational complexity of taking a major Hollywood production outside the United States. It also meant dealing with local wildlife and outdoor locations, an aspect of location shooting in tropical environments that is almost never covered in the glamorous behind-the-scenes images, but that is very much a real and frequently amusing part of the daily experience. Robert Pattinson, who had to look romantically and ethereally beautiful in these tropical settings while also being constitutionally unable to get a tan due to his character's vampire nature, reportedly found the whole sun-drenched location experience somewhat ironic. He has made jokes in interviews about being the only person in Brazil who was required to remain pale and was therefore probably the most careful person on the entire production about sun exposure. Bill Condon's enthusiasm, the director who loved every moment. Multiple cast and crew members from the Breaking Dawn shoot have spoken warmly about Bill Condon as a director. And one consistent thread in these accounts is his extraordinary enthusiasm for the material and for the process of filmmaking itself. He is described as a director who genuinely loves being on set, who is excited by every aspect of the creative process, and whose enthusiasm is infectious even during the long exhausting days that major film productions inevitably involve, his excitement would sometimes manifest in ways that were amusing to the cast. He would become deeply, specifically enthusiastic about particular visual details, the way a flower arrangement looked in a specific lighting condition, or the exact angle of a camera relative to an actor's face, in a way that was clearly the mark of a true visual artist, but that also occasionally extended the shooting day somewhat beyond what anyone had initially anticipated. The cast and crew, who by all accounts liked and respected him enormously, dealt with this by developing an affectionate running joke among themselves about Bill's capacity for enthusiastic perfectionism. The CGI pregnancy belly and Kristen's reactions. One of the more unusual technical challenges of filming Breaking Dawn Part 1 was the need to depict Bella's rapidly advancing and physically alarming pregnancy. The production used a combination of approaches: prosthetic pregnancy bellies of different sizes to represent the different stages of Bella's condition, as well as visual effects to enhance and augment the practical elements in post-production. Wearing a prosthetic pregnancy belly for extended periods of time is, by the accounts of many actresses who have done it, an extremely uncomfortable experience. The prosthetics are typically made of silicone or foam latex. They are warm and heavy, and they have to be carefully attached and maintained throughout the shooting day. Kristen Stewart, who was in her early 20s during the filming of Breaking Dawn, and who had obviously never actually been pregnant, has described the experience of wearing the pregnancy prosthetics with the kind of vivid discomfort that suggests the prosthetics were every bit as unpleasant to wear as one might imagine. She has reportedly made very funny comments on set about the weight and the warmth of the prosthetics, about the strange experience of looking down and seeing a belly that was not hers, and about the particular challenge of performing emotionally demanding scenes while also managing the physical awkwardness of the prosthetic. Robert Pattinson, characteristically, made numerous jokes about this situation that are reported to have kept the mood on the more intense pregnancy scenes from becoming unbearably heavy. Taylor Lautner's stunts going slightly wrong. Taylor Lautner's martial arts background and genuine athleticism made him one of the most physically capable members of the Twilight cast, and he performed a significant number of his own stunts throughout the franchise. On the Breaking Dawn set, his enthusiasm for performing his own physical work sometimes resulted in moments that were more amusing than dramatic. There are accounts from the Breaking Dawn shoot of Taylor attempting to perform certain running and jumping sequences that would ultimately be enhanced or replaced by CGI in the finished film, with a level of intensity and commitment that exceeded what the practical situation actually required. Stunt coordinators on film sets are accustomed to dealing with actors who are either too nervous to throw themselves into physical work, or too eager and have to be reined in for their own safety. Taylor Lautner, throughout the Twilight films, was firmly in the latter category. His instinct was always to go bigger, faster, and harder, and the stunt department occasionally had to gently point out that the specific shot they were filming did not actually require him to launch himself through the air with quite that much force. Nikki Reed and Ashley Greene. The unlikely friendship comedy. Nikki Reed, who plays Rosalie Hale, and Ashley Greene, who plays Alice Cullen, developed a genuine friendship over the course of making the Twilight films together, and their onset dynamic was reportedly a significant source of entertainment for the rest of the cast and crew. The two of them are, by most accounts, very different personality types. Ashley Greene is outgoing, polished, and comfortable in the social machinery of Hollywood, while Nikki Reed is more artistically inclined, somewhat bohemian in her sensibilities, and less interested in the conventional celebrity lifestyle. Their friendship, which crossed these personality differences, was apparently full of good-natured teasing and affectionate bickering that kept the atmosphere on set light during the longer shooting days. Their characters, Rosalie and Alice, have a very specific dynamic in the Twilight universe. They are sisters in the Cullen family, but with very different personalities and approaches to their shared existence. Filming their scenes together, while managing their genuine friendship and its attendant humor, created moments of levity that Bill Condon reportedly welcomed as a counterbalance to the intense emotional weight of the film's more dramatic sequences. The wolf pack sequences, grown men running barefoot. The wolf pack actors, Taylor Lautner, Boo Boo Stewart, Julia Jones, and others, spent a considerable amount of their on-set time in circumstances that were, objectively speaking, fairly ridiculous. The Quileute wolves in the Twilight universe are depicted as massive supernatural creatures when in wolf form, but in human form they run around shirtless in weather conditions that are frequently very cold, since much of the Pacific Northwest filming was done in the genuinely cold and wet climate of British Columbia. Taylor Lautner has spoken in interviews about the physical discomfort of filming many of the outdoor wolf pack sequences in cold weather while required to wear minimal clothing. He described standing in the cold between takes wrapped in whatever warm layers he could find, only to have to strip them all off and pretend to be completely comfortable in the cold the moment the cameras rolled. The contrast between the freezing, shivering actor between takes and the supposedly warm-blooded supernatural wolf on camera became a running joke among the cast and crew. The scenes that involved the wolves communicating telepathically, which on screen involves the audience hearing the wolves' voices while watching CGI wolves interact, were particularly strange to film from the actors' perspective. The actors who played the human versions of the wolf characters had to perform scenes in which they were technically having conversations that would only make sense when completed with CGI animals. Acting out half of a dramatic argument with a creature that does not yet exist in the physical world, knowing that the other half of the conversation will be added in post-production, creates moments of genuine absurdity on set. Kristen Stewart and the wedding dress struggles. The custom Carolina Herrera wedding dress worn by Kristen Stewart in the wedding sequence is, by any measure, a beautiful and extraordinary garment. It is also, according to everyone involved with the production, deeply impractical to wear for a working day on a film set. The long train, the delicate lace, the form-fitting silhouette, and the general architecture of a high-fashion wedding gown are not designed for the reality of repeatedly walking across an outdoor location set, sitting in director's chairs between takes, and navigating the practical chaos of a working film production. Kristen Stewart, who is famously more comfortable in jeans and a t-shirt than in formal or glamorous clothing, has spoken about her experience wearing the gown with characteristic dry humor. She has described the process of getting in and out of it as a significant undertaking requiring multiple members of the costume department, and the process of keeping it clean and undamaged across multiple shooting days in an outdoor forest location as a source of ongoing anxiety for the costume team, if not always for her. She was reportedly quite relaxed about the dress itself, which may have been slightly maddening for the costume department, who were acutely aware of how much it was worth and how difficult it would be to repair or replace. There are accounts from crew members of Kristen sitting in the wedding dress between takes in ways that were deeply unbridled, slouched in a chair, eating snacks, chatting with crew members, which created an amusing visual contrast between the ethereal elegance of the costume and the very ordinary, unprecious behavior of the person wearing it. Billy Burke and his guitar. Billy Burke, who plays Bella's father Charlie Swan, is a genuinely accomplished musician in real life, and he brought his guitar with him to the set of Breaking Dawn as he apparently had done throughout the filming of the franchise. Between takes, particularly during the longer setup periods when the director and cinematographer were working out lighting or camera positions, Billy Burke would find a quiet corner and play his guitar. This became a beloved part of the on-set atmosphere, providing a kind of informal live soundtrack to the waiting periods that are an unavoidable part of any film shoot. He has spoken in interviews about the guitar as his primary coping mechanism for the waiting that acting on a film set inevitably involves. A significant portion of any actor's working day on a film set is, counterintuitively, not acting at all, it is waiting. Waiting for the lighting to be set up. Waiting for the camera to be repositioned. Waiting for another actor who is in a different part of the set to finish their coverage. Billy Burke's solution to this waiting was music, and the rest of the cast and crew generally seemed to have been grateful for it. The screenplay also had to find a way to handle the wolf pack narrative, which in the novel includes sections written from Jacob's perspective. These sections give the reader direct access to Jacob's thoughts, his arguments with Sam, and the dynamics of wolf pack communication. On screen, the filmmakers made the interesting creative decision to have the wolves communicate with each other in their wolf forms through a kind of translated dialogue. The audience hears human voices representing the wolves' telepathic communication. This was a divisive creative choice among fans of the novels, with some finding it effective and others finding it unintentionally humorous, but it was a genuine attempt to solve a difficult narrative problem. Filming the wedding, months of preparation for one day on screen. The wedding sequence required extensive preparation well before the cameras ever rolled. The production designer and the art department spent months developing the visual concept for the ceremony, the specific types of flowers, the way the lighting would work, the arrangement of the seating, the overall color palette and mood. The floral design alone involved thousands of individual flowers, carefully selected and arranged to create the soft, romantic, forest atmosphere that the scene required. The wedding day shoot itself was multi-day in reality, even though it represents a single day in the film's narrative. Filming a complex scene like a wedding ceremony requires shooting from multiple angles, capturing coverage of dozens of individual characters, and getting the specific close-up moments of emotional resonance that the story demands. All of this takes time, and even with a well-prepared crew and willing cast, the wedding sequence took several days to complete. Kristen Stewart spent hours each filming day in hair and makeup to achieve Bella's wedding look, and the process of getting in and out of the custom wedding gown was a production in itself. Robert Pattinson, in his wedding suit, spent long stretches of time between setups waiting in costume, a less glamorous reality than the finished film might suggest. Part 2. Funny and memorable moments on set. Robert Pattinson's legendary awkwardness. Robert Pattinson is, by all accounts, and by his own frequent admission, one of the most genuinely awkward people to ever become a global movie star. He is endlessly self-deprecating, consistently funny in interviews, and deeply uncomfortable with the machinery of celebrity in a way that he has never bothered to disguise. On the set of the Breaking Dawn films, this quality expressed itself in numerous ways that became sources of amusement for his co-stars and the crew. One of the most often repeated stories from the Breaking Dawn set involves Robert's relationship with the various intimate scenes in the film. The honeymoon sequences between Edward and Bella required a level of physical closeness and romantic intensity that, in a real-world filming context, involves a great deal of unglamorous technical work, lighting adjustments, camera repositioning, direction given in the middle of what is supposed to be a tender moment. Robert dealt with the inherent awkwardness of filming intimate scenes by maintaining an almost constant stream of self-mocking humor between takes. He would make jokes about himself, about the situation, about the absurdity of trying to recreate passionate romance while a crew of 40 people adjusted lighting rigs around you. Kristen Stewart, who is more naturally reserved, found his running commentary during these situations a genuine help in keeping the mood on set light and manageable. His relationship with his Edward Cullen costume and makeup was also a perpetual source of on-set humor. The pale makeup and contact lenses required to play a vampire were deeply uncomfortable to wear for extended periods, and Robert has spoken in interviews about the particular misery of the contact lenses, which are custom-made for the role and which he found difficult to insert, maintain, and remove. He was known to make extraordinarily dramatic complaints about the lenses between takes in a way that was clearly exaggerated for comedic effect, and which reliably made everyone around him laugh. The birth sequence, which is one of the most dramatically intense and visually demanding sequences in the film, required a combination of practical makeup effects and digital visual effects. The makeup team spent enormous effort creating the look of Bella's deteriorating physical condition during the pregnancy. The weight loss, the darkening circles under her eyes, the veins becoming visible through her increasingly translucent skin. This involved hours of prosthetic and makeup application daily, as well as careful continuity work to ensure that the progression of Bella's deterioration looked consistent and believable across the various shooting days that contributed to those sequences. The wedding sequence was another significant expense. The elaborate floral arrangements, the costume design, including the custom Carolina Herrera wedding gown, the set dressing of the Cullen property, and the logistics of filming a large-scale set-piece scene all contributed to considerable cost. The wedding dress alone reportedly required an enormous amount of work from the costume department to design and produce, and it went through multiple iterations before the final version was agreed upon. Director Bill Condon, a different creative vision. One of the most consequential decisions made in the production of Breaking Dawn was the choice of Bill Condon as director. He replaced David Slade, who had directed Eclipse, and brought with him a very different set of creative instincts and priorities. Bill Condon is not primarily known as an action director or as a genre filmmaker. He is known as a director of dramatically sophisticated, emotionally nuanced films. His background includes Gods and Monsters, a deeply moving biographical film about director James Whale, which earned Condon an Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay. He also directed Dreamgirls, a large-scale musical drama starring Beyoncé and Jennifer Hudson that demonstrated his ability to handle ambitious, emotionally rich material on a big canvas. When Condon was brought onto Breaking Dawn, he made clear from the beginning that he wanted to treat the material with genuine seriousness and dramatic weight. He was not interested in making a conventional genre film. He saw Breaking Dawn as, at its heart, a story about love, sacrifice, and transformation, themes with real emotional depth, and he wanted to approach it accordingly. His influence is visible throughout the film in specific creative choices. The wedding sequence has an elegance and emotional restraint that reflects his aesthetic sensibility. The honeymoon sequences have a warmth and sensory richness. The color palette, the lighting, the way the camera moves through the Brazilian locations, that are distinctly more cinematic than anything in the earlier Twilight films. The scenes dealing with Bella's deteriorating health are handled with a graphic directness that some critics found bold and others found uncomfortable, but which undeniably gives those sequences a weight and urgency that serves the story. Condon has spoken in interviews about his approach to working with the three lead actors, all of whom he greatly admired. He described his process as one of collaboration and conversation, sitting with Kristen, Robert, and Taylor before filming and talking at length about their characters, their motivations, and their emotional states, ensuring that everyone understood not just what they were doing in a given scene but why they were doing it. This collaborative approach resonated with all three leads, who by this point in the franchise were deeply familiar with their characters and welcomed the opportunity to explore them more fully. The screenplay challenges, adapting the most complex novel. Melissa Rosenberg, who had adapted every previous Twilight novel for the screen, faced her most significant challenges with Breaking Dawn. The novel is Stephenie Meyer's longest and most narratively complex work, covering an enormous amount of story territory. The decision to split it into two films gave Rosenberg more room to breathe than she would have had with a single film adaptation, but it also created its own challenges. The most discussed challenge in adapting Breaking Dawn Part 1 was the pregnancy storyline. In the novel, This section of the book is presented through Bella's perspective, and it is intensely internal. Much of the horror and the wonder of what she is experiencing is conveyed through her thoughts and feelings rather than through external action. Translating internal experience into cinematic drama requires finding ways to externalize what is happening emotionally, and Rosenberg worked closely with Condon on developing scenes and moments that would allow the audience to viscerally experience what Bella is going through. The budget and making of the film. The financial foundation. How much did it cost? The Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn Part 1 was produced with a reported production budget of approximately $110 million. This was a significant jump from the budgets of the earlier films in the franchise. The original Twilight film had been made on a remarkably modest budget of just $37 million. A relatively small sum for a major Hollywood production, which reflected Summit Entertainment's cautious initial investment in what was then an unproven cinematic property. When Twilight became a massive financial success, earning over $390 million worldwide against that modest budget, the studio's willingness to invest significantly more in the sequels grew accordingly. New Moon was produced on a budget of approximately $50 million. Eclipse came in at around $68 million. And then with Breaking Dawn, the decision to split the final novel into 2 films, combined with the increased ambitions of director Bill Condon and the expanded scope of the story, pushed the budget into genuinely major Hollywood blockbuster territory. The $110 million budget for Breaking Dawn Part 1 was the largest single production investment Summit Entertainment had made in the franchise up to that point. It is worth noting that Breaking Dawn Part 1 and Breaking Dawn Part 2 were filmed simultaneously, back to back, in a single extended production period. This meant that the cast and crew were essentially making 2 films at once, with certain scenes, locations, and production elements shared across both productions. This simultaneous shooting approach, while logistically complex, was economically efficient in certain respects. You only had to build certain sets once, you only had to travel to certain locations once, and you only had to assemble the full cast in the same place during a single production window rather than 2 separate ones. The total combined budget for both Breaking Dawn films together was reported to be in the range of $250 million, making the Breaking Dawn production one of the most expensive undertakings in Summit Entertainment's history. Where the money went. Production costs broken down. Understanding where the budget of Breaking Dawn Part 1 actually went requires looking at the specific creative and logistical demands of the film. The cast salaries alone represented an enormous portion of the budget. By the time Breaking Dawn was in production, Kristen Stewart, Robert Pattinson, and Taylor Lautner were among the most commercially valuable young actors in Hollywood, and their compensation reflected that status. Each of the 3 leads was reported to have earned in the range of $25 million for their work across the 2 Breaking Dawn films combined, with some reports suggesting that Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson may have earned even more when back-end profit participation was included. The supporting cast, including Billy Burke, Peter Facinelli, Elizabeth Reeser, Nikki Reed, Jackson Rathbone, Ashley Greene, and Kellen Lutz, also commanded significantly higher salaries than they had received for the earlier films, given that the franchise's success had elevated the profiles of everyone associated with it. The locations represented another major expense. The film was shot primarily in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which served as the primary production base, with additional filming in Brazil for the Isle Esme honeymoon sequences and in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, which had been used extensively throughout the earlier films in the franchise for the Pacific Northwest settings. The decision to use Baton Rouge as the primary filming location was driven in part by Louisiana's generous film tax incentives, which allowed the production to maximize the value of its budget by filming in a state that offered significant financial benefits to major productions. The Isle Esme sequences, filmed in part on location in Brazil and in part on constructed sets, were among the most expensive individual sequences in the film to produce. Creating a convincing private tropical island paradise required extensive set construction, location scouting and rental costs, international travel expenses for the cast and crew, and the logistical complexity of filming in a foreign country. The production spent time in Parati, a stunning colonial town on the coast of Brazil, and other Brazilian coastal locations, to capture the beauty and tropical atmosphere of the honeymoon setting. Getting an entire film crew to Brazil, housing them, feeding them, and managing the practical challenges of international location shooting adds up to enormous expense very quickly. The visual effects budget was also substantial, particularly for the sequences involving the wolf pack. The CGI wolves that represent Jacob, Seth, Leah, and the other pack members required extensive digital effects work. Each wolf is a distinct character with recognizable physical traits that correspond to the human character it represents, and making those wolves feel real and emotionally legible rather than cartoonish requires very high-quality visual effects work. The wolf transformation sequences, in which human characters shift into their wolf forms, are particularly effects-intensive. What emerges from looking at both the financial reality of Breaking Dawn Part 1's production and the human reality of what happened on set is a picture of a major film that was, like all major films, a complex and often surprising mixture of glamour and ordinariness. The budget was real and enormous. The locations were genuinely beautiful. The performances were genuinely committed. And throughout all of it, the people making the film were human beings with the full range of human experiences, uncomfortable in their costumes, funny between takes, struggling with prosthetics, making each other laugh during the hard days, and finding friendship and connection in the shared experience of making something together. That is, ultimately, how all films get made. And knowing that makes the finished product, for all its romance and fantasy and supernatural drama, feel a little more real and a little more wonderful. And that is a wrap on today's video here on Cinematic Movie Insider. This channel exists for one reason and one reason alone, because movies matter. Stories matter. The characters we grow up watching, the worlds we escape into, the emotions we feel sitting in a dark theater or on our couch at 2 a.m, all of that matters more than most people give it credit for. And here on Cinematic Movie Insider, we take all of it seriously. Whether we are breaking down a classic, diving deep into a franchise, exploring the lives of the people who bring these stories to life, or going behind the scenes of the films that define generations, this channel is your home for all of it. Every single video we make is made with genuine passion and real dedication, because we believe that the audience watching deserves nothing less than that. So if today's video gave you something, whether that was new information, a fresh perspective, a reason to revisit an old favorite, or simply an enjoyable way to spend some time, then we have done exactly what we set out to do. If you have not already, please hit that subscribe button right now and join the Cinematic Movie Insider family. It is completely free, and it means that every new video we upload goes straight to you. Hit the notification bell as well so you never miss a single upload. And if you enjoyed today's video, a like takes literally 2 seconds and it makes an enormous difference to how this channel grows. Share our videos with the movie lovers in your life. Recommend us to a friend. Leave a comment below telling us what you want to see next. We read every single comment, and your suggestions genuinely shape the content we make. We are just getting started. The best videos on this channel are still ahead of us. And we are incredibly grateful that you are here for the journey. Until next time, keep watching, keep exploring, and we will see you in the next video. This is Cinematic Movie Insider. Do not go anywhere.